So in the last episode we got the body into paint, and I must say I'm very, very happy with that. It's currently sat in the tail vise at the other end of the bench, just curing up a little bit before we can do the flatten polish on it. And I've also taken the time to just ensure that the neck still fits easily within the neck pocket, and it still does. Which means we've got a little bit of time on our hands to make a start on getting the neck finished. And this should be a fairly straightforward job. There's nothing complicated going on here. It will just be a few coats of amber lacquer, and then we've got a logo to put on the front of the headstock. However, this does still need a tiny little bit of finish sanding. It's a few little inconsistencies that I need to get out, and it feels a little bit fuzzy, so we need to just get that down to a suitable grade of paper. So I'm going to start off going to use some 240 to start with, and just start again giving this a little bit of a sand. And with that all rubbed down to 240 now, I'm just going to take some 400 and just very quickly kind of fly over that and just get it all down to a nice, consistent, smooth finish. I'm paying particular attention just to kind of make sure that all of these edges have got a little bit of radius on them, just to ensure that when we're rubbing down the lacquer we haven't got a sharp edge which will break through really, really easily. That little bit of radius will make it just that bit harder to kind of break through. That just leaves a few last little steps that we need to take before we can get this to the spray booth. First one is I'm just going to take out the adjuster for the truss rod, because that's just going to be in the way of stuff. Normally these just slot in, but this one's actually got a screw that holds it in place. And I'll just put that somewhere safe so it doesn't get lost. In fact, I'll just tape that screw in place just to make sure, because you never know. And then next step is I'm just going to tape off the fretboard. Now I always tape them up to the join between the fretboard and the maple, because I'm not really a fan of having the lacquer on the side of the fretboard. Some people are different, but that's just my personal preference. And the reason I do it this way is once you actually get onto polishing up the lacquer on the neck with hardwoods like this Wenge, you can actually get a really nice polish onto the wood itself, which in my opinion looks nicer. Now, out of character as well, I'm not using blue masking tape, I'm using the stuff that Nitolac sent me, and I can report it works just fine. And then just so I've got some means of controlling this in the spray booth, I'm just going to stick a little screw in one of the tuner screw holes. And I can attach a bit of string to that. And then so I've got somewhere to hang it up. I'll just put a spare. Next screw in there. And that's ready now to go over to the paint booth. Okay, so I've got some lacquer mixed up and I've got this hung up. So realistically, it's just a case of giving this a couple of quick squirts with some amber lacquer, leaving it to go off for a little while, and then we can start to get some clear coats onto it. Then we can get the logo on and we can then over lacquer that. That's going to take a little bit of time because obviously we need to put a lot of lacquer over the front of the headstock. But the rest of it should be relatively quick. Okay, so that's had 3 coats now, and I think that's kind of the colour I want it to be, so I'm happy to leave it at that. I'm going to leave this overnight a little bit to cure up, and then we'll be back in the morning to fire some clear coats over it. However, before I pack in for the evening, I've just printed off the logo to go on the headstock of this, so I need to get that onto the bench and just give it a few coats of clear acrylic. And this acrylic really serves 2 purposes. Firstly, it seals in the ink on the decal, and secondly, it gives the decal a little bit of structure. What happens if you don't put enough clear on, when you put it in the water, the whole thing just kind of becomes a sloppy mess and you can't do anything with it. The clear coats just make it that little bit more substantial so you can get it off the backing paper and onto your job without it all falling to pieces. So I usually give these about 3 or 4 coats. And you don't want to put too much on at once because unlike nitro, if this gets on too thick, it just won't cure at all. Okay, so we'll catch up in the morning. Okay, so this neck's had a couple of decent coats of clear now, so it's where we need to be in that regard. Haven't put quite so much on the front face here, but this is going to get an absolute ton of clear before too much longer, because it's time to put on our little logo. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll cut this out a little bit nearer the actual shape of the thing. The smaller these are, I find, the easier they are to bury. Less to hide, really, I suppose. And I also think it's a good idea to try and make the corners as round as you can. Just helps things blend in. Okay, so hopefully I've got enough acrylic on this. It's just a case of dropping it in the water and giving it a few seconds to soak. Yep, and that's coming off the back end now. So just very gently slide that. Put that in position. I think that's looking good. And then just dry that off a little bit. Try not to move it like that. Just take the bulk of the moisture away from that. And now we can just leave that to dry. Probably take an hour or so. And then we can start to put some clear coats over the top of that. Now looking at this one, I've not used this paper before actually. It's a new brand and this is the first one of them I've done with it. It actually looks to be very thin, which is great because that means we don't have to put quite so much clear on to completely bury it. So I'll leave that for an hour to dry up, then we'll start the long slow process of clear coating it. And I've left this an hour or so to dry off and it's kind of nice and dry now, and I'm really impressed with this new paper. I'll leave a link to the Amazon page where I've got this in the description. This has sat down flatter than any other decal paper I've ever used before, so I'm hoping I won't have to put a huge amount of clear lacquer over the top of this to actually get it to bury itself, which is great because it can take a long time. So I'll just get a couple of quick coats on there and then I'll spend the next couple of days off camera just building that up to the thickness that we need. Okay, so there's the neck all lacquered and we've made a start on getting that decal buried. Thankfully everything still fits together just fine, so that's good. This paint, however, is still a little bit on the wet side. If I kind of dig my thumbnail into it in one of the pickup cavities, it leaves an impression. So this isn't ready for flattening and polishing just yet. So we'll get this back on its paint stick and leave it a few more days before we do that. So that's going to have to be for the next episode. A little bit of a short one this time, but I'll be back in a couple of days' time when we can start to get this flatted and polished, and we'll be heading towards completion on this build. So as always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, check out the link for the Night or Lac website in the description, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.